Welcome back. Now, in the last video, we've implemented a lot of things in save progress. Whenever we call save progress, we're now saving 8 additional values. We're saving 4 on the player state and our 4 primary attributes. Now we know that this is being called because our checkpoints are calling it. If we go to our checkpoint in the private folder in checkpoint in OnSphere overlap, we're executing the save progress interface function. So we know that this stuff is being saved, we just have to load it. Now loading it is going to be done in our character, and I'd like to do it in Possessed By, because at this point we know we're going to have a valid attribute set and ability system component. Now, so far we're calling add character abilities and init ability actor info. Let's think about how we're actually initializing our primary, secondary, and vital attributes as well as our abilities. We can go and look at init ability actor info. Let's take a look. Here it is for the character. We're getting our ability system component, initializing it. That's good. We're casting to Aura ability system component. We're setting our ability system component in attribute set. Subscribing to on ASC registered, taking our ability system component, registering a gameplay tag event to debuff. We're getting our player controller, initting the overlay, and then initializing our default attributes here. So it's in init ability actor info that we initialize our default attributes. Now we're going to do this from disk, provided that we have saved data. So I'm going to go back up to init ability actor info in Possessed By. And notice we also have on rep player state, which is doing the same thing. Now these 8 variables that we're setting here are replicated, but again, we're saving to disk. This is a single player solution. In multiplayer, we would be retrieving these from a database, right? So in init ability actor info, I'd like to remove completely what we're doing when it comes to initializing our primary attributes. So down here where we're calling initialize default attributes, I'm going to remove this now because we're going to load it in from disk. So we can go back to Possessed By, and now after init ability actor info, our primary attributes won't be set yet. Now we're going to want to add character abilities from disk as well. So this is another thing that we're going to want to change. We'll have a to-do. Let's say to-do load in abilities from disk. So we'll get to that when we figure out how to save our abilities, but for now we want to initialize our attributes. So let's make a function to initialize our attributes. Let's actually make a function to just load in our info from disk. Let's make a function here on Aura character, and this can be a protected function, and we can call this load progress. So let's generate the definition, and I'm going to put this right up there by Possessed By. So going up to Possessed By, I'm going to put it right underneath. That way we can see it, and we're going to call load progress after initializing ability actor info here. So we'll know that we have a valid ability system component at this point, and we can handle loading our progress here. So what is load progress going to do? Well, we're definitely going to want to retrieve our saved data from the game mode. So we need to get the game mode. I'm just going to search for Aura game mode and find where I'm getting it down here in save progress. In fact, save progress also has some other things I want to do. I want to retrieve in-game save data, check to see if it's null, and all that good stuff. So I'm just going to copy this whole if statement and go back to load progress and paste it in here. So the only thing I'm concerned with our save data is the stats for now. I'm going to start setting things on my player state. So that means I need my player state. I'm going to say if a Aura player state equals a cast to a Aura player state. We're going to cast get player state. And we'll take Aura player state, and we'll set those 4 variables. First, we're going to call set player level, and I believe it's called set level. And that's going to be on save data, player level. Next, we'll take Aura player state and call set XP. We'll use save data, XP. We'll next take Aura player state and call set attribute points. Do we not have a setter? I don't think we do. So we'll have to go and add one. So let's go to public player, Aura player state. Let's see if we don't have one. We don't. We have add to, but not set. I'd like a setter for both. So we'll have void set attribute points in 32 in points, and a void set spell points in 32 in points. Let's generate these. And we'll set attribute points to endpoints. And for set spell points, we'll set spell points to endpoints. But what do we do every time we set these? We broadcast delegates, right? That's important. So we have to broadcast on attribute points change delegates. And we'll broadcast attribute points. And for spell points, we'll get on spell points change delegate broadcast spell points. So now we have setters we can use, and back in Aura character, now we can set attribute points to save data attribute points. And we can get Aura player state and set spell points to save data spell points. So that takes care of the player state variables, but that's the easy part, right? What about our attributes? Because attributes should be set using gameplay effects if we can help it. I'm going to go back into the editor, and I'm going to go into Blueprints, Ability System, Data, and open Character Class Info. Why am I doing this? Because each of our character classes has a gameplay effect for its primary attributes. And if we take a look at them, say the primary attributes effect for the Elementalist, we'll see that this is a gameplay effect with our primary attributes, and they each have scalable floats, and we're using curve tables for that given class to set these values based on level. But if we're loading in from disk, we don't want to set these based on level because we have the freedom to spend points on attributes. And we need to load in our loadout, whatever progress we've been pouring into our primary attributes, the points that we've been choosing for ourselves, that's what we want to apply. So we need a new gameplay effect for primary attributes. And I'd like to use set by caller magnitudes that we can set when applying our primary attribute effect. And I'd like to add that effect here to character class info. We'll just have a primary attributes gameplay effect specific to loading in from disk. So I'm going to add one of these to our character class info data asset. So that's going to be in public, ability system, data, character class info. I'm going to add a new T subclass of U gameplay effect. So here's one. So I'm going to just copy it and go down into the data asset and add one way down here. It's going to be just above secondary attributes. And I'm going to call this primary attributes underscore set by caller. That way it's specifically a set by caller version of this. And it's going to be in common class defaults. It doesn't have to be specific to any character class because the character class doesn't matter. We're going to set those 4 primary attributes by set by caller based on what we've loaded in from disk. So now that character class info has this primary attributes set by caller, we need to create a primary attributes gameplay effect and change it to set by caller. Well, I can go to ability system, Aura effects, and get my GE Aura primary attributes. Now this has strength, intelligence, resilience, and vigor, and these are set to default values here. And really, these could just be the starting values if we're loading in for the first time. But if we're not loading in for the first time, we should have another one with set by caller magnitudes. So I'm going to duplicate Aura primary attributes, but I'm going to call this one GE primary attributes underscore set by caller. And this will have the same 4 primary attributes, but they'll be set by caller. So I'm going to take the magnitude calculation type and change it to set by caller and choose the data tag to be the attribute tag for this attribute. So that's going to be attributes primary. For this one, it will be strength. Next is intelligence. I'm going to set magnitude calculation type to set by caller, choosing intelligence. Next is resilience. We'll change this to set by caller, and the tag will be resilience. And finally, vigor. We're going to change this to set by caller and choose vigor. So now we have a set by caller version, and we can set that on our character class info as soon as we compile and launch again, now that we have this. So back in C++, we need a way to apply that and set its set by caller magnitudes, but only if we're not loading in for the first time. So how are we going to know if we've loaded in for the first time? Well, that's something we could save. It's something that we could have on our load screen save game, such as a Boolean. I could put this all the way at the top, actually, just above player. We'll put it right here. We can have a bool called be first time load in and set it to true by default. So the first time we load in, we can set this to true. And we can check this when loading in our stats. And that way we'll know if we should use the default values or if we should load in from disk. Now, if we've saved our progress, then we need to set this to false. So let's take care of that before we move on. So when are we going to save our progress? When we hit a checkpoint, right? When we hit a checkpoint is when we save our progress. So let's go to checkpoint.cpp. And here we have execute save progress. So if we go into character or a character, into save progress, implementation, here is where we know that we're no longer fresh. We've just saved for the first time. We need to take our save data and take B first time load in and set it to false. Now we can check this if we need to know if this is our first time loading in. So back to load progress, we can check here if this is our first time loading in, right here. We'll say if save data, B first time load in, well, then we can just do what we were doing before. We can apply our default attributes. We can use that function that we just took out, initialize default attributes. We can even add our character abilities as well. And whatever we have set for these, for our initial attributes and abilities, that's what we'll set. But that's only if it's a first time load in. If it's not, we have the else case, then we need to load in from disk. And that means we need to apply some gameplay effects to initialize our attributes. And then, of course, we'll handle abilities shortly. But how are we going to apply our primary attributes and our secondary and our vital? Well, if we go to Aura Ability System Library, we'll go to the CPP file. Here's a function called initialize default attributes. Here's a good example of how we can apply attributes. We're not setting any set by caller magnitudes here, but we are applying gameplay effects, and we're getting those gameplay effects from our data asset, character class info. We're getting the class default info, getting the primary, secondary, and vital attributes from that. We can create a Aura Ability System Library function to apply set by caller magnitudes that we retrieve from a save game object. So I'd like to create a function to do that, and we'll do that in the next video. So we're almost there. We're almost ready to initialize our default attributes from disk. We just need a function to do it. So we'll do that next. But before we wrap up though, let's compile so we can add that primary attribute gameplay effect with set by callers to our data asset. I'm just going to close down and relaunch the editor. Okay, so back in the editor, we can go to character class info, And down in our common class defaults, we have primary attributes set by caller, and we can use our set by caller primary attributes gameplay effect we created here. So this primary attributes set by caller is just like our other primary attributes gameplay effects, except it requires set by caller magnitudes. And that's what we're going to use to set these when loading in from disk. So we'll create a function to do that in the next video. So excellent job. I'll see you soon.